My name is Evelyn Carter, and I'm 73 years old. What I'm about to tell you is a story that changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and the lengths some people will go to protect their secrets. If you're listening to this far, comment below where you're watching from, because I need to know that someone, somewhere, is hearing this truth that almost died with me before continuing. Subscribe to the channel, follow my story until the end, and comment on the city you're watching. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my world collapsed. I remember it so clearly because Tuesdays were always my favorite day of the week. I'd wake up, make my coffee in the little blue mug Jacob had given me for Mother's Day 15 years ago, and I'd sit by my kitchen window watching the morning light dance across my garden. That particular Tuesday, the leaves were just starting to turn, painting the world in shades of amber and gold that reminded me of Jacob's eyes when he was little. I was sitting there, lost in memories of my son as a boy when the phone rang. The sound cut through the peaceful morning like a knife through silk. I almost didn't answer it, thinking it might be another telemarketer or someone trying to sell me insurance I didn't need. But something made me pick up that phone, and I wish to God I had never had. Mrs. Carter? The voice was cold, clipped, professional in the way that only comes from years of practice at delivering bad news without feeling it. It was Sophia, my daughter-in-law, though she'd never felt like family to me. Not really. Yes, this is Evelyn, I said, already feeling a chill creeping up my spine. I'm calling to inform you that Jacob passed away yesterday evening. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually dropped the phone, and I could hear Sophia's tinny voice continuing to speak from where it had fallen on the kitchen floor. I stumbled, reaching for the counter to steady myself, my legs suddenly feeling like they couldn't support my weight. The blue mug slipped from my other hand and shattered against the linoleum, coffee spreading in a dark stain that looked too much like blood. What? I whispered, fumbling to pick up the phone. What did you say? Jacob is dead, she repeated, and there was something in her voice that I couldn't quite place. Not grief, exactly. Something colder. He had a heart attack at work yesterday. He was pronounced dead at the hospital at 6:47 p.m. I sank into my kitchen chair, the world spinning around me. Jacob was only 42 years old. He was healthy, active, always joking that he'd outlive us all. This couldn't be real. This had to be some kind of mistake. I want to see him, I said, my voice breaking. I need to see my son. There was a pause, and when Sophia spoke again, her voice was even colder than before. That won't be possible. The funeral arrangements have already been made. It's going to be a private service. Family only. I am family, I said, anger cutting through my shock. I'm his mother. Mrs. Carter, she said, and I could hear the false sympathy dripping from her words like poison from a snake's fangs. Jacob and I discussed this before he died. He specifically requested that the service be small, intimate, just his immediate family. The words echoed in my head like a cruel joke. I had carried Jacob under my heart for 9 months, brought him into this world through 37 hours of labor that nearly killed us both. I had raised him alone after his father died when Jacob was only 8 years old, working 2 jobs to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. I had bandaged his scraped knees, helped him with homework, cheered at every soccer game and school play. I had loved him with every fiber of my being for 42 years, and now his wife was telling me I wasn't immediate family. Please, I begged, my pride crumbling in the face of my desperate need to see my child one last time. Please let me say goodbye. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, but the decision has been made. The service will be held tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Riverside Cemetery. I trust you'll respect Jacob's wishes. She hung up before I could say another word. I sat in that kitchen for hours, surrounded by the broken pieces of the mug and the spreading stain of cold coffee, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My son was dead, and I wasn't allowed to attend his funeral. The woman he had married, the woman who had systematically pushed me out of his life over the past 5 years, was going to bury him without me. You see, it hadn't always been like this. Jacob and I had been close once, incredibly close. After his father died, it was just the 2 of us against the world. We had our own little traditions, our inside jokes, our Sunday morning pancakes, and Saturday afternoon gardening sessions. He used to call me every week, sometimes every day, just to chat about nothing and everything. He'd tell me about his work at the architectural firm, his dreams of designing buildings that would outlast us all, his plans for the future. But then he met Sophia at a company party 5 years ago, and slowly, gradually, everything changed. At first, I was happy for him. He was 37 and had been alone for so long after his divorce from his first wife. He deserved love, companionship, someone to share his life with. Sophia was beautiful, sophisticated, and successful in her own right as a real estate agent. She seemed perfect for him. The first warning sign came when Jacob stopped calling as often. When I asked him about it, he laughed it off, saying he was just busy with work and his new relationship. That was understandable, I told myself. It was normal for a man to want to spend time with the woman he was falling in love with. Then came the canceled visits. Jacob had always come to see me every other Sunday, a tradition we'd maintained even after he got his own apartment and started his career. But suddenly there were always excuses. Sophia had planned something special. They were going out of town. He was tired and needed to rest. The final blow came when they got engaged. Jacob called to tell me the news, and I could hear the happiness in his voice. But there was something else there, too. A distance that hadn't been there before, as if he was speaking to an acquaintance rather than his mother. "I want you to meet her properly," he said. "Maybe you could come over for dinner next Sunday?" I accepted eagerly, hoping that spending time with Sophia in a relaxed setting would help us bond. I brought flowers and a bottle of wine, and I spent extra time getting ready, wanting to make a good impression on the woman my son loved. The dinner was a disaster from the moment I walked through the door. Sophia was polite, even charming, but there was an ice-cold calculation behind her smile that made my skin crawl. Every story I told about Jacob's childhood, she had a way of twisting into something embarrassing or unflattering. Every memory I tried to share, she dismissed with a laugh and a comment about how different things were now that Jacob had grown up and moved on. "You raised such an independent son," she said at one point, her hand possessively on Jacob's arm. "He's told me how important it is to him to build his own life, separate from the past." Jacob looked uncomfortable, but he didn't contradict her. That was the moment I knew I was losing him. The wedding 6 months later was small, elegant, and expensive. I was invited, of course, but I felt like an outsider at my own son's wedding. Sophia's family filled most of the seats, a crowd of well-dressed, successful people who looked at me with barely concealed pity. I sat in the third row, wearing the best dress I owned, watching my son promise to love and cherish a woman who was already working to erase me from his life. After they got married, the distance grew even wider. Phone calls became texts, then even those became rare. Sunday visits stopped entirely. When I called, Sophia would often answer and tell me that Jacob was busy, at work, sleeping, or unavailable. She always promised to give him my message, but he rarely called back. I tried to adapt, to be understanding. Marriage was an adjustment, I told myself. Jacob was building a new life with his wife, and that was natural and healthy. I didn't want to be one of those overbearing mothers who couldn't let go. So I stepped back, gave them space, and hoped that eventually we'd find a new normal. But the new normal never came. Instead, my son simply disappeared from my life, bit by bit, until that phone call on that terrible Tuesday morning. Now, if you've been in a situation like this, you'll understand what I'm about to tell you. The grief was overwhelming, of course, but alongside it was something else equally powerful. Anger. I was angry at Sophia for keeping me away from my son's funeral. I was angry at Jacob for apparently agreeing to it, and I was angry at myself for allowing it to happen, for not fighting harder to stay in his life. But that afternoon, as I sat in my living room staring at photos of Jacob throughout his life, something inside me rebelled against accepting this version of events. The Jacob I had raised, the son I had loved, and who had loved me back, would never have wanted me excluded from his funeral. Something wasn't right about this whole situation. I decided to go to the cemetery anyway. The next day, I dressed in my best black dress, the one I'd worn to my husband's funeral 24 years earlier, and drove to Riverside Cemetery. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, but I was determined to say goodbye to my son, invited or not. When I arrived at 2 p.m., the cemetery was empty except for a maintenance worker mowing grass in the distance. No funeral, no mourners, No fresh grave. Nothing. I sat in my car for an hour, thinking I must have misunderstood, that maybe the service had been delayed or moved to a different location. Finally, I approached the maintenance worker. "Excuse me," I said, my voice trembling. "Was there a funeral here today? For Jacob Carter?" The man stopped his mower and shook his head. "No, ma'am, no services today. Haven't had one all week, actually." I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe I had gotten the time wrong. Maybe it was at a different cemetery. Maybe. But even as I tried to rationalize what had happened, a cold certainty was settling in my chest. Sophia had lied to me. That evening, I called every cemetery in the city. No Jacob Carter funeral. No Jacob Carter burial. Nothing. The next morning, I did something I probably should have done immediately. I called St. Mary's Hospital, where Sophia had said Jacob died. "I'm calling about my son, Jacob Carter," I told the woman in the records department. "He supposedly died there on Monday evening." There was a pause, then typing. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have no record of anyone by that name being admitted or dying here on Monday." "Are you sure you have the right hospital?" I called every hospital in the city. The answer was always the same. "No, Jacob Carter, no record. No death. What would you do if this happened to you? If someone told you your child was dead, but you couldn't find any evidence of it?" I felt like I was losing my mind. Was this all some cruel joke? Had I misunderstood something fundamental about the situation? Or was my son still alive? The thought hit me like lightning, filling me with a mixture of desperate hope and terrifying uncertainty. If Jacob were alive, why would Sophia tell me he was dead? What could motivate such a monstrous lie? I knew I had to find out the truth, but I also knew I had to be careful. If Sophia was capable of lying about Jacob's death, there was no telling what else she might be capable of. I needed evidence, proof, something concrete I could hold on to. That's when I remembered the spare key. Years ago, when Jacob first bought the house he shared with Sophia, he had given me a spare key just in case of emergencies. I had never used it, respecting their privacy and their marriage, but this felt like an emergency of the highest order. I waited until Thursday afternoon, when I knew Sophia would be at work. The house was in Oakwood, an upscale neighborhood about 20 minutes from my modest apartment. As I pulled into the driveway of the beautiful colonial that Jacob was so proud of, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The key still worked. I let myself into the house, calling out softly just in case anyone was home. The silence that greeted me was complete and somehow ominous. The house was immaculate, as always. Sophia was obsessive about keeping everything perfect, as if she lived in a magazine spread rather than a home. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly, but I knew I'd recognize it when I saw it. I started in Jacob's study, the room where he kept his architectural drawings and personal papers. It was here that I found the first clue that my world was about to be turned upside down again. Sitting on his desk, in plain sight, was a stack of mail. Recent mail. Bills addressed to Jacob Carter with dates from this week. This week, after he was supposed to have died on Monday. My hands were shaking as I rifled through the stack. Electric bill, water bill, credit card statement, and then, at the bottom, something that made my knees buckle. It was a letter addressed to me, in Jacob's handwriting. The postmark was dated just 3 days ago. I tore open the envelope with trembling fingers, and my son's familiar handwriting blurred through the tears that immediately filled my eyes. "Mom," the letter began, "I know we haven't talked in a while, and I know that's mostly my fault. Sophia says you're busy with your own life now and don't have time for an old married guy like me. But I miss you terribly. I miss our Sunday mornings and your terrible jokes and the way you always knew exactly what to say when I was upset about something. I've been thinking a lot lately about Dad and how much I wish he could have met Sophia. I think he would have seen through her in a way that I'm only just beginning to. Mom, I'm starting to realize that I've made some terrible mistakes and I don't know how to fix them. I don't even know if they can be fixed. I found some things in Sophia's desk last week. Things that have made me question everything I thought I knew about the last few years. There are letters, Mom. Letters from you that I never received. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, invitations to dinner, and messages asking if I was okay. So many messages that I never knew existed. I also found the letter you wrote me after we had that fight about Thanksgiving 2 years ago. The letter where you apologized for something you didn't even do wrong. Where you begged me to tell you what you had done to make me so distant. I never got that letter, Mom. Sophia intercepted it, along with all the others. I don't know how to face you with this knowledge. How do I tell you that my wife has been systematically destroying our relationship for years? How do I admit that I was so blinded by what I thought was love that I let it happen? I'm going to leave her, Mom. I can't stay married to someone who would do this to us. To you. I'm seeing a lawyer next week to start divorce proceedings. Once that's done, once I've extracted myself from this mess, I want to try to rebuild what we had. I want to come home. I love you, Mom. I've never stopped loving you, even when I was too stupid and too manipulated to show it. Please don't give up on me. Please wait for me to find my way back to you. Your son, Jacob P.S. I'm hiding a spare key to a safety deposit box behind the loose brick in the fireplace, third brick from the left on the bottom row. If something happens to me, if Sophia tries to keep us apart again, everything you need to know is in that box. Box 247 at First National Bank, downtown branch. I read the letter 3 times before my brain could fully process what it meant. Jacob was alive. Jacob still loved me, and Sophia had been intercepting our communications for years, deliberately destroying our relationship. But if Jacob was alive, where was he? Why hadn't he called or come to see me? The letter was dated just days ago, but it felt like it had been written by someone who was planning for the possibility that he might not be around to deliver it in person. My blood ran cold as the implications hit me. What if something had happened to Jacob? What if Sophia's lie about his death wasn't entirely a lie? What if she had done something to him? I rushed to the fireplace, my hands shaking as I felt along the bottom row of bricks. The third one from the left was indeed loose, and behind it, I found a small key wrapped in tissue paper. I was just tucking the key into my purse when I heard the front door slam. "Jacob?" Sophia's voice called out. "Are you home early?" I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was trapped in the study with no way out except through the main hallway, where Sophia would see me. I could hear her heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she moved through the house. "Jacob?" she called again, and there was something different in her voice this time, a note of concern, or maybe suspicion. I pressed myself against the wall behind the door, praying she wouldn't come into the study. For a long, terrifying moment, the house was silent, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then I heard her on the phone. "It's me," she said, her voice low but clear enough for me to hear from where I was hiding. "I think someone's been in the house. Some of his papers are moved around. No, I'm sure. I know exactly how I left everything." There was a pause then. "Well, she can't prove anything, can she?" "We made sure of that. As far as anyone knows, he had his accident, and that's the end of it." I know. I just need to be more careful. The old woman is more persistent than I thought." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. Accident. They were talking about Jacob as if something had really happened to him. And Sophia wasn't working alone in whatever this was. "Fine," Sophia continued. "I'll take care of it. But if she keeps poking around, we might have to consider more permanent solutions. I know what we agreed. I'm just saying she's becoming a problem." The call ended, and I heard Sophia's heels clicking again as she moved through the house. I waited, barely breathing, until I heard her go upstairs. Then I crept out of the study and slipped out the back door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I made it to my car and drove home in a haze of terror and confusion. Jacob wasn't just missing, he was in danger, or worse. And Sophia was involved in whatever had happened to him. But I had the key to the safety deposit box, and Jacob had promised that everything I needed to know would be there. The next morning, I was waiting outside First National Bank when it opened at 9 a.m. The box required both the key and identification, and for a terrifying moment I worried that Sophia might have somehow gotten my name removed from the access list. But the bank employee led me to the safety deposit box area without question. Box 247 was small, but it was packed with documents, photographs, and items that told a story I wasn't prepared to hear. The first thing I saw was a thick folder labeled Evidence in Jacob's careful architectural lettering. Inside were photocopies of documents I didn't understand at first. Financial records, insurance policies, correspondence between Sophia, and someone named Marcus Webb. As I read through the papers, a horrifying picture began to emerge. Sophia had been planning Jacob's death for months, possibly years. She had taken out multiple life insurance policies on him without his knowledge, policies worth over $2 million. She had been slowly poisoning him with small doses of digitalis, a heart medication that, in the right doses, could cause a heart attack that would be nearly impossible to detect in a standard autopsy. Marcus Webb was apparently her accomplice, a man she had been having an affair with for over a year. Together, they had planned to kill Jacob, collect the insurance money, and start a new life. But something had gone wrong with their plan. According to the documents, Jacob had become suspicious and started investigating Sophia's activities. He had discovered the affair, the insurance policies, and the digitalis she had been hiding in her cosmetics case. The last document in the folder was a letter Jacob had written but never sent, addressed to the police. In it, he detailed everything he had discovered about Sophia's plan to murder him. He wrote that he was planning to turn the evidence over to authorities, but first, he wanted to secure his mother's safety and make sure she knew the truth about what had been happening. The letter was dated 1 week ago. Beneath the documents, I found something that broke my heart all over again. It was a small jewelry box, and inside was the bracelet I had given Jacob for his high school graduation. It was a simple silver chain with a small charm that read, "Love always. Mom." I thought he had lost it years ago, but he had kept it all this time. There was also a note attached to the jewelry box. "Mom, I've worn this every day since Sophia came into my life, hidden under my watch where she couldn't see it. It reminded me that no matter how far apart we seemed, you were always with me. I want you to have it back now, along with the knowledge that you never lost me. I lost myself for a while, but I never stopped being your son." I sat in that sterile bank room and cried harder than I had since my husband died. My son was gone, truly gone this time, but he had died trying to find his way back to me. Sophia hadn't just stolen him from me. She had murdered him for money. The last item in the box was an envelope with my name on it, sealed with wax. Inside was Jacob's will, handwritten and notarized just days before his disappearance. "Last will of Jacob Michael Carter," it began, and as I read through it, I realized that my son had not only discovered Sophia's plan, but had also taken steps to ensure that justice would be served. One way or another, they will leave everything to me. His house, his savings, his retirement accounts, even the life insurance policies that Sophia thought she would inherit. But there was more. Jacob had discovered that Sophia had been stealing from her real estate clients, using her position to siphon money from escrow accounts. He had documented all of it, and the evidence was included in the safety deposit box. At the bottom of the will was a note that made me cry all over again. "Mom, I know that by the time you read this, I'll probably be gone. Sophia is more dangerous than I initially realized, and I may not have much time left. But I need you to know that I figured it out in the end. I remembered who I was, who raised me, and what you taught me about right and wrong. I'm giving you a choice, Mom. The same choice you gave me all those years when I was growing up and made mistakes. You can pursue justice through the legal system. There's enough evidence here to put Sophia and her boyfriend in prison for the rest of their lives. Or you can choose mercy, the way you always did with me. If you choose justice, take everything to Detective Sarah Martinez at the downtown precinct. I've already contacted her, and she knows to expect you if something happens to me. If you choose mercy, well, you'll know what to do. You always did. Either way, please know that I love you. I'm sorry it took me so long to find my way back to you. I'm sorry Sophia was able to poison our relationship for so long. And I'm sorry I won't be there to give you the grandchildren you always wanted, or to take care of you in your old age the way you took care of me. But please don't let my death be the end of the story. Use what I've left you to do something good in this world. Use it to help other families stay together, to keep other mothers and sons from being torn apart the way we were. Love always, your son Jacob. I left the bank carrying more than just documents and evidence. I was carrying the weight of impossible choices, the burden of truth, and the knowledge that my son's life had ended just as he was trying to come home to me. That night, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had received that terrible phone call just a week earlier, and I tried to decide what to do. I could go to the police. I could see Sophia and her accomplice arrested, tried, and convicted for Jacob's murder. I could watch them pay for what they had done to my son and to me, or I could do something else entirely. I thought about Jacob as a little boy, the way he used to come to me when he had done something wrong, his eyes wide with fear and remorse. I never punished him harshly for his mistakes. Instead, I tried to teach him about consequences and redemption, about the difference between justice and revenge. "Mom," he had said to me once when he was about 10 years old and had broken a neighbor's window with a baseball, "what's the difference between being punished and making things right?" I had knelt to his level, looking into those golden brown eyes that were so much like his father's. "Punishment is about paying for what you did wrong," I had told him. "Making things right is about learning from your mistakes and using them to do something better." Now, faced with the greatest wrong that had ever been done to our family, I had to decide which path to take. The next morning, I called Sophia, Mrs. Carter, she said, and I could hear the false sympathy in her voice. "How are you holding up? I know losing Jacob has been difficult for both of us." "I know the truth, Sophia," I said quietly. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I don't know what you mean," she finally said, but her voice had changed. The sympathy was gone, replaced by something harder and more calculating. "I know Jacob didn't die of a heart attack. I know you killed him. I know about the insurance policies, the digitalis, Marcus Webb, all of it." Another silence, longer this time. "You can't prove any of that," she said finally. "Actually, I can. Jacob documented everything before he died. He knew what you were planning, and he made sure the truth would come out." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, quick and shallow. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to come to my house tonight at 7 o'clock. Come alone. We're going to have a conversation about my son and about what happens next. And if I don't come, then I go to the police in the morning with everything Jacob left behind." She hung up without another word. That evening, at exactly 7 o'clock, Sophia knocked on my door. She looked different than she had at Jacob's house the week before. Older, more haggard, with dark circles under her eyes that even makeup couldn't hide. I let her in and led her to my living room, the same room where Jacob had spent countless hours as a child, playing with toys, watching television, falling asleep in my arms when he was sick. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch. She perched on the edge of the cushion, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. "Mrs. Carter, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Stop," I said firmly. "We're past the point of lies, Sophia. I know what you did to my son. I know how you did it. I know why you did it. And I know who helped you do it." Her facade cracked slightly, and for the first time, I saw something genuine in her expression. Fear. "The question now," I continued, "is what we're going to do about it. Are you going to turn me in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I studied her face for a long moment. This was the woman who had stolen my son from me, who had murdered him for money, who had tried to make me believe he had died wanting nothing to do with me. This was the woman who had destroyed the most important relationship in my life, and then tried to profit from it. But she was also a woman who was clearly drowning in the consequences of her own actions, who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, who was probably living in constant terror of being discovered. "I'm going to give you the same choice Jacob always gave people who wronged him," I said. "You can face justice, or you can try to make things right." "I don't understand." I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out the folder of evidence Jacob had left for me. I set it on the coffee table between us, and I watched her face go white as she recognized some of the documents. "This is enough evidence to put you in prison for the rest of your life," I said. "Murder, insurance fraud, embezzlement from your clients, conspiracy. You'll never see the outside of a prison again." She stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. "But," I continued, "I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in honoring my son's memory." "What does that mean?" I sat back in my chair, the same chair where I had rocked Jacob to sleep when he was a baby, where I had helped him with homework, where I had listened to his dreams and fears throughout his childhood. It means you're going to confess. You're going to write down everything you did, everything you planned, and everyone who helped you. You're going to explain why you kept my son away from me, why you intercepted our communications, and why you destroyed our relationship. And then you're going to help me make sure it never happens to another family. And then what? You'll still turn me in? I shook my head. If you do what I'm asking, if you help me honor Jacob's memory, then I'll let the justice system decide what happens to you. But I won't be the one to turn you in. Sophia stared at me in confusion. I don't understand. What's the difference? The difference is that you'll turn yourself in. You'll go to the police, tell them what you've done, and face the consequences of your choices like an adult. That's what Jacob would have wanted. Not revenge, but accountability. For the first time since she had arrived, Sophia's carefully constructed composure completely crumbled. She put her face in her hands and began to sob. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere profound and broken inside her. I loved him, she said through her tears. At first, I really did love him. But he was so devoted to you, so connected to you, and I was so jealous. I thought if I could make him choose me over you, then I'd know he really loved me. So you destroyed our relationship. She nodded, still crying. It started small. I'd forget to give him messages from you. I'd schedule things when I knew you had plans with him. I'd make comments about how you were trying to control his life, how you couldn't let go and let him be independent. And then it got easier to lie, easier to intercept letters and calls, easier to convince him that you were the one pulling away, that you were disappointed in him, that you didn't approve of our marriage. She looked up at me then, her face streaked with tears and makeup. By the time I realized how far it had gone, I didn't know how to stop it. Jacob was so hurt by what he thought was your rejection of him, and I was in too deep to tell him the truth. So you decided to kill him instead. Fresh sobs broke from her chest. The insurance money was Marcus's idea. He said we could be together, start over somewhere new, have the life we wanted. And Jacob was already so depressed about losing you, so isolated. Marcus said it would be a mercy, in a way. A mercy, I repeated, and I couldn't keep the disgust out of my voice. I know how it sounds, she said desperately. I know it was wrong. But I was so deep in the lie by then, and Marcus said if Jacob ever learned the truth about what I'd done to his relationship with you, he'd leave me anyway. He'd hate me. I'd lose everything. So instead, you took everything from him. His life, his future, his chance to reconcile with me. She nodded miserably. I see that now. I see how selfish and horrible it was. But at the time, I felt trapped. I felt like I had no choice. There's always a choice, Sophia. Jacob taught me that. You can always choose to do the right thing. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs you everything. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of her confession settling between us. Finally, I spoke again. Tell me about his last days. Tell me if he suffered. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He was getting suspicious. He found some of the letters I had hidden, some of the evidence of what I was doing. He confronted me about intercepting your communications, and I denied it. But I could tell he didn't believe me. When did you start poisoning him? About 3 months ago. Just small amounts, enough to make him feel sick, to make him think he was having heart problems. I thought if he went to the doctor, they'd find something wrong with his heart naturally, and then when he died it wouldn't be suspicious. But that's not what happened. She shook her head. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong with him. His heart was perfectly healthy, so Marcus said we needed to increase the dosage, make it look like a sudden heart attack. And Jacob figured it out. The night he died, he confronted me. He had found the digitalis in my cosmetics case. He said he knew what I was doing, and he was going to the police. He was going to call you and tell you everything. So you killed him. Marcus was there. He said we didn't have a choice anymore, that Jacob was going to ruin everything. He held Jacob down while I gave him a massive dose. Enough to stop his heart instantly. The clinical way she described my son's murder made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to keep listening. We made it look like he had collapsed in the garage while working on his car. Then Marcus called his contact at the coroner's office, someone who owed him money from gambling debts. They arranged to have the body cremated immediately, before anyone could ask too many questions or demand an autopsy. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the image of my son's final moments, trying not to think about how terrified he must have been when he realized what was happening to him. When I opened them again, Sophia was staring at me with something that might have been hope. "What do you want me to do?" she asked. I reached into the folder and pulled out a piece of paper and a pen. "Write it all down. Everything you just told me, and everything you didn't. Names, dates, details. Make it complete enough that the police won't need to rely on my word alone." She took the pen with trembling hands. And then you call Detective Sarah Martinez and tell her you want to confess to the murder of Jacob Carter. You tell her everything. You cooperate fully with the investigation, and you accept whatever consequences come from that. What about Marcus? What about him? Will you tell them about Marcus?" I looked at her for a long moment. She was still trying to protect her accomplice, still trying to minimize the damage to someone who had helped her murder my son. "Sophia, let me be very clear about something. I'm giving you this chance, this one chance, to do the right thing because that's what Jacob would have wanted. But if you try to protect Marcus, if you try to minimize what you've done or shift blame to anyone else, then I will take everything Jacob left me straight to the police, and I will make sure they throw the book at both of you." She nodded quickly. "I understand. I'll tell them everything." For the next 3 hours, I sat in my living room and watched my son's killer write out a confession to his murder. She wrote about the poison, about the affair, about the systematic destruction of our relationship, about the insurance fraud and the cover-up. She wrote until her hand cramped and her tears made the ink run, but she kept writing until every detail was on paper. When she finished, she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "What happens now?" "Now you call Detective Martinez. Tonight? Right now." She made the call on my kitchen phone, the same phone where I had received the news of Jacob's supposed death just over a week earlier. I listened as she told Detective Martinez that she needed to confess to a murder, as she arranged to meet at the police station within the hour. After she hung up, she turned to me one last time. "Mrs. Carter, Evelyn, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I am sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to Jacob, and I'm sorry for what I did to you. I'm sorry for taking away your chance to say goodbye to him." I looked at this woman who had destroyed my family, who had murdered my only child, who had tried to steal his love from me even in death, and I found that I did believe her, not because her sorrow could undo what she had done, but because I could see that she was drowning in the consequences of her choices, just as Jacob had predicted she would be. "I'm not the one you need to apologize to," I said quietly. "Jacob can't hear your apologies anymore. The only thing you can do for him now is make sure his death serves some purpose. Make sure other families don't have to go through what we went through." She nodded, gathering up the pages of her confession. "How?" "By telling the truth, all of it. By helping the police understand how someone like you could convince someone like Jacob that his own mother didn't love him anymore. By making sure the system learns to recognize the warning signs so other people don't fall through the cracks the way my son did." Sophia left that night to turn herself in, and I never saw her again. But over the following months, as the case made its way through the legal system, I learned more details about what had happened to Jacob, and how Sophia's manipulation had been even more extensive than I had realized. The investigation revealed that Sophia had been intercepting, not just letters and phone calls, but emails, text messages, and even birthday and Christmas gifts that I had sent to Jacob over the years. She had created fake email accounts in my name and sent cruel messages to Jacob, making him think I was angry with him or disappointed in his life choices. She had even gone so far as to hire someone to call Jacob pretending to be me, to tell him I was too busy to see him, or that I didn't approve of his marriage. The level of planning and manipulation was staggering. For 5 years, she had systematically destroyed our relationship while making each of us believe the other was responsible for the distance between us. Marcus Webb was arrested 2 days after Sophia's confession. He tried to claim that he had been manipulated by Sophia, that he hadn't known she was planning to murder Jacob. But the evidence told a different story. Phone records showed that he had been researching digitalis poisoning for months. Financial records revealed that he had been the one to suggest the life insurance policies and had even helped Sophia forge documents to take them out without Jacob's knowledge. the coroner who had falsified. Jacob's death certificate was also arrested, along with 2 other officials who had been part of the cover-up. It turned out that Marcus had been running a small corruption ring, using his connections in city government to cover up crimes for anyone willing to pay the right price. During the trial, which lasted 6 weeks, I learned details about my son's final months that broke my heart all over again. According to his friends and coworkers, Jacob had been deeply depressed in the weeks before his death. He had told several people that he felt like he was losing his mind, that he couldn't understand why his mother had stopped loving him, why I had cut him out of my life so completely. His best friend from college, David, testified that Jacob had called him crying just a week before he died. He said he couldn't figure out what he had done to make his mother hate him, David told the court. He said he had tried calling her, tried visiting, tried sending letters, but she never responded. He thought maybe he had done something unforgivable and just couldn't remember what it was. Hearing that testimony was almost more than I could bear. While I had been wondering why Jacob had abandoned me, he had been wondering the same thing about me. While I had been hurt by his apparent rejection, he had been devastated by what he thought was mine. Sophia was ultimately sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Marcus received the same sentence, plus additional time for the corruption charges. The judge, in delivering the sentence, said something that stayed with me. The defendants didn't just take Jacob Carter's life. They stole years of a relationship between a mother and son, years that can never be recovered or replaced. They committed murder not just against one person, but against an entire family. But the legal resolution, satisfying as it was, didn't answer the larger question that had been haunting me throughout this entire ordeal. What to do with the inheritance Jacob had left me. His will had been very specific. Everything he owned, his house, his savings, his retirement accounts, and yes, even the life insurance policies that Sophia had fraudulently taken out on him. All of it came to me. The total value was just over $3 million, money that represented a lifetime of hard work and careful saving. Jacob's final letter had given me a choice: justice or mercy. I had chosen justice for Sophia and Marcus, and they had been held accountable for their crimes. But now I faced another choice about what to do with this wealth that had come to me through such tragic circumstances. If you're still listening to this story, I want you to think about what you would do in my situation. Jacob had suggested that I use his inheritance to help other families stay together, to prevent other mothers and sons from being torn apart the way we had been. But how do you turn money into healing? How do you transform tragedy into hope? The answer came to me gradually, over many sleepless nights and long walks through the neighborhood where Jacob had grown up. I thought about all the families I knew who were struggling, not with murderous spouses or elaborate conspiracies, but with the ordinary challenges that can drive wedges between parents and children. Distance, miscommunication, pride, stubbornness, and the simple failure to understand each other across generational lines. I thought about single mothers working 2 jobs and missing their children's school plays, just like I had done when Jacob was young. I thought about teenagers who felt misunderstood by parents who were trying their best but didn't know how to connect. I thought about adult children who had moved away for work or school and gradually lost touch with aging parents who didn't know how to bridge the gap. I thought about all the relationships that could be saved if people just had a little help, a little support, a little guidance in learning how to communicate with each other. That's when I knew what Jacob would have wanted me to do with his legacy. 6 months after Sophia and Marcus were sentenced, I established the Jacob Carter Foundation for Family Reconciliation. The foundation provides counseling services for families who are struggling to stay connected, financial assistance for people who want to visit distant relatives but can't afford to travel, mediation services for parents and children who have had serious conflicts, and educational programs about the importance of maintaining family relationships. We also created a scholarship program for young people who are studying social work, family therapy, or related fields, with the requirement that scholarship recipients commit to spending at least 2 years working with families in crisis. But perhaps most importantly, the foundation provides a service that I wish had existed when Jacob and I were being torn apart by Sophia's manipulation. We offer verification and communication services for families who suspect that someone might be interfering with their relationship. If a parent stops hearing from their adult child, or if a child can't understand why their parent seems to have rejected them, they can contact our foundation for help in determining whether their communications are actually reaching their intended recipient. It seems like such a simple thing, but it's exactly what Jacob and I needed during those 5 years when we were being systematically kept apart. One honest conversation, one verification that our messages weren't reaching each other, could have saved us years of heartache and ultimately saved Jacob's life. The foundation operates out of a small building downtown, not far from where Jacob's architectural firm used to be. We have a staff of 12 people, including counselors, social workers, and volunteers, who are all committed to the mission of keeping families together. Every day, I go to the foundation office and I see the work being done in Jacob's name. Last month, we helped reunite a father and daughter who hadn't spoken in 10 years because of a misunderstanding that had grown out of proportion. The month before that, we provided counseling for a family where the parents were getting divorced, and the children were being used as weapons against each other. We've mediated custody disputes, provided family therapy for people who couldn't afford it otherwise, and even helped solve a few cases where one family member was genuinely trying to keep others apart, though nothing as extreme as what Sophia had done to Jacob and me. But the work that means the most to me is the prevention work. The educational programs we provide to schools and community groups about healthy family communication. The workshops we offer for parents of teenagers help them understand how to stay connected with children who are growing up in a very different world from the one they knew. The support groups for adult children who are trying to care for aging parents while managing their own families and careers. It's the kind of work Jacob would have believed in, the kind of practical help that makes people's lives better in small but meaningful ways. As I'm recording this story today, it's been 3 years since that terrible phone call that started this whole nightmare. 3 years since I thought I had lost my son forever, only to discover that I had lost him in a way that was somehow even worse than I had originally believed. The grief never fully goes away. I still wake up some mornings and for just a moment forget that Jacob is gone. I still reach for the phone to call him when something funny happens, or when I need advice about a decision I'm facing. I still save newspaper articles that I think he would find interesting, forgetting that there's no one to share them with anymore. But alongside the grief, there's something else now. There's the knowledge that Jacob's death wasn't meaningless, that his life and his love continue to make a difference in the world through the work of the foundation. There's the satisfaction of knowing that other families are staying together because of the help we provide, that other parents and children aren't falling victim to the kind of manipulation that destroyed our relationship. And there's peace, the peace that comes from knowing that Jacob died trying to find his way back to me, that he never stopped loving me, even when he thought I had stopped loving him. The peace that comes from choosing mercy over revenge, from building something positive out of something tragic. I kept Jacob's house, the house where Sophia thought she would live out her days on the proceeds of his life insurance. But I don't live there. Instead, I turned it into a respite home for families who are going through crisis, a place where parents and children can come to spend time together in a neutral, supportive environment while they work through their problems. The irony isn't lost on me that the house where Jacob was murdered, the house that was meant to be a symbol of Sophia's greed and betrayal, has become a place of healing and reconciliation. Jacob would have appreciated that irony. He always loved it when justice had a sense of poetic symmetry. I still live in my modest apartment, surrounded by pictures of Jacob throughout his life. But now those pictures don't just make me sad. They also make me grateful for the years we did have together, for the love we shared, and for the legacy he left behind. The bracelet he kept hidden all those years, the one I gave him for graduation, sits on my kitchen table next to my coffee cup every morning. It reminds me that love doesn't die, even when the people we love are taken from us. It reminds me that sometimes the strongest connections are the ones that survive despite every effort to destroy them. If you've listened to this entire story, if you've stayed with me through all these painful details and difficult truths, then I want to leave you with the lesson that Jacob's death taught me. It's a lesson about the choice between justice and mercy, between revenge and reconciliation, between allowing tragedy to make you bitter or using it to make you better. When someone betrays you, when someone hurts the people you love most in the world, your first instinct is probably going to be revenge. You want them to suffer the way you're suffering. You want them to pay for what they've done. And sometimes that desire for justice is appropriate and necessary. But revenge is a double-edged sword. It can consume you if you're not careful. It can make you into someone you don't recognize, someone your loved ones wouldn't recognize. Jacob gave me another choice in that letter he left behind. He reminded me of the values he had learned as a child, the values I had tried to teach him about forgiveness and redemption and using our pain to help others rather than to hurt them. Choosing mercy doesn't mean letting people escape the consequences of their actions. Sophia and Marcus are in prison, where they belong, but it does mean choosing what you do with your own pain, your own anger, your own grief. I chose to build something instead of destroying something. I chose to help other families instead of focusing on my own loss. I chose to honor Jacob's memory by continuing the work of love that he had started when he decided to come back to me. And you know what? It worked. Not in the sense that it brought Jacob back or erased the pain of losing him. Nothing can do that, but it gave meaning to his death, purpose to my grief, and hope to other families who are facing their own crises. The Jacob Carter Foundation has helped over 800 families in the 3 years since it was established. We've prevented at least a dozen divorces, helped reunite countless parents and children, and provided support and resources to families who thought they had nowhere else to turn. More importantly, we've created a model that other communities are starting to replicate. There are now Jacob Carter Family Centers in 12 different cities, all working to keep families together and help them through difficult times. That's Jacob's real legacy, not the money he left behind, not the house or the savings accounts or the insurance policies. His legacy is the love that continues to spread outward, touching families he never met, helping people he never knew, creating connections that wouldn't exist if he hadn't chosen to document Sophia's betrayal and trust me to do the right thing with what he discovered. Every time I see a family at one of our centers working through their problems instead of giving up on each other, I think about Jacob. Every time I get a letter from someone thanking the foundation for helping them reconnect with a parent or child they thought they'd lost forever, I hear his voice. And every time I'm faced with a choice between justice and mercy, between revenge and reconciliation, between anger and love, I remember what he wrote in that final letter. Use what I've left you to do something good in this world. That's what I've tried to do. That's what I'll keep trying to do for as long as I have breath in my body, because love is stronger than betrayal. Hope is more powerful than grief. And sometimes the most devastating losses can become the foundation for the most meaningful victories. If this story has touched you, if it's made you think about your own family relationships or reminded you of someone you need to call or forgive or reconnect with, then Jacob's legacy is continuing to grow. That's all he ever wanted, for love to win in the end, for families to stay together, for people to choose understanding over judgment and mercy over revenge. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for letting me share Jacob's memory with you. And if you're dealing with your own family crisis, your own betrayal, your own impossible choice between justice and mercy, I hope Jacob's example will help guide you toward the path that leads to healing rather than more hurt. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. We can choose love over hatred, hope over despair, and building up over tearing down. We can take the worst things that happen to us and find ways to transform them into something beautiful, something meaningful, something that honors the people we've lost and helps the people who are still here. That's what Jacob would have wanted. That's what he wanted according to the letter he left me. And that's what I've tried to do with the inheritance he gave me. Not just the money, but the choice, the responsibility, and the opportunity to make his death count for something. Love always finds a way to win, even when it seems like everything is lost. Even when the people we love are taken from us. Even when we're betrayed by those we trust most. Even when justice seems impossible and mercy seems foolish. Love still wins in the end if we let it. That's the silent inheritance Jacob left me. Not the money or the house or the evidence of Sophia's crimes, but the understanding that love is the only thing that truly matters, the only thing that really lasts, the only thing worth fighting for. And if you remember nothing else from this story, remember that. Remember that love is always worth fighting for, that families are always worth saving, and that sometimes the greatest victories come from choosing mercy over revenge. Jacob's story ended tragically, but his legacy lives on in every family that stays together because of the work done in his name. And that, more than any legal verdict or financial settlement, is the justice he deserved and the mercy he would have wanted me to choose. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being part of the continuing story of love's triumph over betrayal, hope's victory over despair, and life's ultimate triumph over death.